chess friends, a lot of you have been curious about the most dynamic and forceful way to start a chess game as white, which also remains strong even when the opponent plays correctly, keeping you in a favorable position. Today, we're diving into the Belgrade Gambit. It begins with pawn to e4, then pawn to e5, next, you move knight f3, and the opponent will likely defend with knight c6. These are common moves. Here's where it gets interesting. Instead of the usual bishop c4, you bring out your other knight with knight c3. It might seem like you're just getting your pieces out, but actually, you're laying the groundwork for some exciting traps. Often, your opponent will play knight f6, which takes us into the Belgrade Gambit, our goal. They might opt for bishop c5, but we'll cover that later. Back to knight f6, you advance your pawn to d4, opening the center and challenging their pawn, leading them to capture it. Instead of taking back immediately, you make a surprising move to knight d5. This creates a complex situation. Put yourself in the opponent's shoes. What would you do as black? Considering your options here highlights the complexity of this strategy. The most obvious moves for black, like knight takes d5, often lead to trouble. Take a moment to think about this. In chess, there's a move called knight takes e4, which is decent but can be risky in real games. However, the best choice for black is knight b4, a move which is suggested by me. This move is quite unexpected and rare in actual play. Now, let's look at another common response by black, knight takes c4. In this situation, you should consider playing queen e2 if you're playing a fast-paced game like Blitz. This move is a bit tricky because it puts the black knight in a bind. Unable to move due to the threat to the king, after black plays f5 to defend, you can advance your other knight to increase the pressure on the pinned knight, which remains stuck on e4. After launching an aggressive attack, black finds themselves under pressure as both of your knights control key squares and pose various threats. Supported by your queen along the e-file, black might attempt to alleviate the pressure by moving their knight to e7, aiming to exchange the active knight on d5 and protect their king. However, this move can be a fatal mistake, as it allows you to capture on e4, leading to a winning position for you. And let me share a quote with you. From the bitterness of disease man learns the sweetness of health. If black captures your knight on d5, you have a stunning response with knight d6, delivering a double check and checkmate in one move, a clever and decisive tactic. Alternatively, if black decides to take your other knight, you can deliver a knockout blow with your queen to h5, leading to a winning advantage. When black tries to defend with knight e7, you can increase the pressure by moving your piece to e5, creating multiple threats. This move attacks black's rook on h8, and sets up potential moves like knight takes c7, which would threaten both the king and the rook, and knight f6 check. Black is likely to struggle with handling all these threats. Moving on from knight e7, the typical response for black is bishop e7, attempting to stabilize the position. However, this move also leads to a losing situation. The best move for black, recommended by me, is surprisingly the pawn move to d3. This move involves sacrificing a pawn, but it's a strategic choice that can significantly alter the course of the game. The pawn move to d3 can lead to a complex situation on the board. Interestingly, only higher rated players, above 2100, sometimes opt for this move, indicating it's rare and not commonly encountered in most games. Given its rarity and complexity, it might not be practical to delve deeply into those variations, focusing on the more typical move, bishop e7, which is a natural and straightforward way to protect the king and prepare for castling. After black plays bishop e7, you can capture on e4 with your queen, maintaining pressure. Black may then try to reposition their pieces to safer squares. Your next move, bishop d3, intensifies the attack, especially with the potential threat of queen takes h7. To counter this, black might play g6, which, while offering some defense, makes their king's position more vulnerable and weakens certain squares. You can exploit these weaknesses by moving your bishop to h6, creating a powerful attack. Typically, black might respond with rook e8, aiming for a counterattack, but by this point, the position is usually considered lost for black. After castling, you continue to pose multiple threats, leaving black in a precarious situation. For instance, you could move your bishop to c4, directly targeting black's king, while also maintaining pressure along the e-file to attack black's pieces. If black attempts a counterattack with bishop g5, this move actually turns out to be a mistake, you can simply capture the offending piece, leading to a winning position. If black recaptures with the queen, they end up losing their rook on e8, which becomes undefended. In this scenario, black's response is insufficient. Capturing your queen leads to them losing their own queen, and you emerge a piece ahead. Subsequently, you can gain further material by capturing a pawn or rook, enhancing your winning advantage. Now, considering a hypothetical situation where black plays bishop f8 to counter your queen and bishop, think about how you would respond to maintain your advantage and counter black's strategy. Let's take it as a puzzle, solve it and answer me in the comments. Now, regarding the chess position discussed, after black plays x4, white can respond with queen e2, increasing the pressure. Black needs to be very cautious here. Without proper preparation, they could quickly find themselves in a losing position. The next frequent move by black is knight takes d5, which is also not the best choice. Capturing back on d5 with your pawn, you then pressure black's other knight, gaining tempo and spatial advantage due to the advanced pawn on d5. Your knight now controls the e5 square, limiting black's knight movements. If black opts for knight b4, attacking your pawn on d5, you can simply develop your bishop, which both defends the pawn and continues to improve your position. Often, black will then play bishop c5, aiming to develop their pieces and maintain pressure. After both sides castle, the position might look symmetric at first glance, but black's knight on b4 is actually poorly placed. White can exploit this by playing a3, pushing the knight back to a6, continuing the offensive. White can advance with b4, pressuring black's bishop. If the bishop retreats, now you can play bishop g5, attacking to the queen. Black would play f3, but this move creates a weakens through the bishop diagonal. Play d6 check now, after king h8. And let me share a quote with you. Once you see that things get better with time, you will see the reason why you had to be patient with yourself. Pulling the bishop back to f4 can solidify white's dominance, leaving black's pieces nearly immobile and significantly restricting their options. To conclude the game with flair, white can proceed with a decisive tactical sequence. To channel the aggressive and imaginative style of Mikhail Tal, you might play knight e5, launching a bold attack and showing readiness to sacrifice material for positional advantage. With this move, the knight is primed to jump to f7, creating significant threats. Black can't capture the knight without risking their queen's safety. Instead, if black opts to take the bishop, you can intensify the attack by moving your queen to h5, setting up multiple threats including nf7, and possibly bishop d3, aiming for a qxh7 checkmate. Should black play d6, it could lead to a precise and elegant checkmate. An appealing aspect of this opening strategy is that it doesn't require memorizing numerous variations. White's play involves straightforward piece development and castling, resulting in natural, aggressive moves. In contrast, black faces a more complicated task, needing to find less intuitive moves to remain viable in the game. If black's knight retreats to b8 or e7, with e7 being more common, white can capture the pawn on d4 with the queen, achieving a dominant position that's effectively winning. Despite the complexity, in practical terms, white holds a significant advantage because black struggles to develop smoothly. White can proceed with straightforward moves like bishop d3, castling, rook e1, and bishop g5, playing naturally and aggressively. This approach emphasizes that white doesn't need to memorize specific lines, as the moves are quite intuitive. On the other hand, black's situation is more challenging. If black tries to unravel their position, perhaps moving knight g6, white can castle and continue to apply pressure. Black might play bishop e7 in an attempt to develop and defend. But this move overlooks the vulnerability of the g7 pawn. White can capture on g7, preventing black from castling and further deteriorating their position. When black plays bishop f6, they might hope to create opportunities, perhaps even trapping the white queen. However, white can respond with rook e1, directly challenging black's king, although black could cover with a minor piece, likely with d7, aiming to maintain piece coordination. This plan falls short. White can deliver a stunning checkmate with bishop f5, showcasing a rare bishop checkmate. If you're facing this opening as black, after seeing strategies like this, you might wonder how to respond. While the computer recommends the complex move knight b4, it might be too intricate for practical play. A simpler and more solid approach is to play bishop b7, which avoids direct confrontation with white's aggressive setup. this move aims to establish a sturdy position. Focusing on castling and maintaining a safe and secure setup, rather than engaging in immediate tactical skirmishes, if white plays bishop f4, aiming to threaten your c7 pawn as black, it's still not advisable to capture on d5. Taking the pawn would allow white to recapture with another pawn, pressuring your knight, gaining space, and creating a strong position. Instead, as black, you should play d6, which blocks the bishop's diagonal and maintains a safe position. Following this setup, you can proceed with castling on your next move, securing a solid and safe position. If white's active knights become a concern, you have the option to exchange them in the subsequent moves, which can lead to a favorable and comfortable position for black. Playing d6 as black leads to a position that is objectively equal, meaning you're not in any immediate danger and everything is stable. This strategy effectively addresses the move knight f6, but you should also be prepared for bishop c5. A common response from black, however, bishop c5 can lead to tactical vulnerabilities that white can exploit, as demonstrated in the video analysis. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and becoming part of the Stockfish region. Many subscribers have reported significant improvements in their chess skills, and the hope is that you will experience similar success. So wish you all the best. Bye bye, take care, see you soon.